At a family dinner, my parents ordered me to pack my bags so my brother's family could move in. I smiled and stayed silent, waiting for them to arrive, unaware I had sold my house a month prior. Look, I have never been the golden child of my family. Not even close. I am 28 years old, I work as an accountant, and I like my quiet, predictable life. If my family were a movie, my older brother Garrett would be the leading man, and I would be the extra passing by in the background holding a blurry cup of coffee. Garrett is 32, wears suits that cost more than my first car, and walks into rooms expecting a round of applause. And honestly, with our parents, he usually gets one. It was the second Sunday of the month, which meant it was time for our mandatory family dinner at my parents' house. I arrived 15 minutes early, as usual, and immediately started helping my mom in the kitchen. I chopped vegetables, set the table, poured the water, and folded the napkins. It was quiet, peaceful even. But the moment the front door swung open, the energy in the house completely shifted. Garrett walked in, followed closely by his wife, Cassandra. Cassandra is the kind of woman who treats every social interaction like a networking event. She was holding a bottle of wine like it was a newborn baby, loudly announcing that it was a rare vintage from a boutique vineyard. My mom literally dropped the serving spoon she was holding and practically sprinted to the hallway. "Oh, Garrett, honey. You look exhausted. Let me take your coat," she cooed, completely ignoring the fact that I had been standing next to her for 20 minutes. My dad emerged from the living room, clapping Garrett on the back with a booming laugh, asking him how the big corporate world was treating him today. I just stood by the dining table, quietly placing the last fork down. No one had asked how my day was. No one asked how the tax season was going at my firm. But I was used to it. I pulled out my chair, sat down, and watched the Garrett and Cassandra show begin. They sat at the center of the table, holding court. My mom kept passing the best cuts of roast beef to Garrett's plate, making sure his glass was never empty. I watched Cassandra casually check her phone under the table, probably planning her next aesthetic social media post. I just focused on my mashed potatoes, letting the familiar, dull ache of being invisible wash over me. It was just another Sunday. It was the baseline of my existence in this family. I was the safety net. Garrett was the star. While Garrett was busy explaining some convoluted golf story to my dad, my eyes drifted to the fireplace mantel behind them. My mom had recently rearranged the family photos. Right in the center, framed in heavy silver, was Garrett's college graduation picture. Surrounding it were various sports trophies from his high school days, participation medals, mostly, and maybe one or chief awards for a regional track meet he ran a decade ago. Looking at that mantle always brought up a very specific, very bitter memory. When I was 17, I won the state debate championship. It was a huge deal for me. I had worked for months, studying late into the night, practicing my speeches in front of my bedroom mirror until my throat was completely raw. I got a beautiful, heavy brass trophy. For exactly 1 week, it sat on that mantle. Then, Garrett came home from college for the summer, bringing a box of his old fraternity memorabilia. My mom, without even asking me, took my debate championship trophy, wrapped it in an old newspaper, and shoved it into a dusty cardboard box in the attic to make room for Garrett's frat paddles and a cheap plastic bowling trophy he won on a drunk Tuesday. When I asked her about it, she just waved her hand dismissively and said Garrett needed to feel welcome at home. That was the theme of my life. Garrett needed the space. Garrett needed the attention. This dynamic reached its absolute peak 3 years ago when our grandfather passed away. Grandpa had a modest estate, but his biggest asset was a beautiful, sprawling 4-bedroom house in a very nice, very expensive part of town. He also owned a much smaller, slightly run-down 2-bedroom house on the far edge of the suburbs. I was there when the will was read. I didn't know it at the time, but my mom had spent the last year of Grandpa's life whispering in his ear. She convinced him that Garrett, with his glamorous wife and plans for a big family, absolutely needed the 4-bedroom estate. She told Grandpa that I was simple, single, and would be perfectly fine with the smaller house. So, that is exactly what happened. Garrett got the mansion. I got the fixer-upper. I never complained. What would be the point? Arguing with them was like trying to argue with a brick wall. I just took my keys, moved into my little two-bedroom house, and started painting the walls myself. Back at the dinner table, the main course was cleared, and my mom was bringing out a massive apple pie. Garrett cleared his throat, tapping his spoon against his water glass. It was a classic Garrett move, making sure all eyes were on him before he spoke. "Cassandra and I have some huge news," Garrett announced, wrapping his arm around his wife's shoulders. Cassandra was practically vibrating with excitement. "We have decided to sell the house." My dad almost choked on his coffee. "Sell Grandpa's house? Why on earth would you do that, son?" Garrett flashed a blinding, arrogant smile. "Because, Dad, we are moving on to bigger and better things. We are liquidating the asset to invest in Preston's new tech startup." I froze. Preston was a college buddy of Garrett's. The guy was a slick talker who had already launched and crashed 2 different businesses in the last 5 years. "We are getting in on the ground floor," Cassandra chimed in, her voice high-pitched and breathless. "Preston has developed an app that is going to completely revolutionize how independent contractors track their logistics. He is guaranteeing a 300% return on our investment within the first 18 months. 300%. The accountant in me could not stay quiet. It was like a physical reflex. "A guaranteed 300% return?" I said, my voice cutting through their excitement. "Garrett, that is legally impossible to guarantee. If someone is promising you that kind of yield in a year and a half, it is either a Ponzi scheme or he is lying to your face. You have 2 small kids. You shouldn't gamble your entire home equity on a startup." The temperature in the dining room plummeted instantly. Garrett's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, condescending sneer. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Look, Nora. I know you mean well, but I have a degree in finance from a top-tier university. You took accounting classes at the local community college and balance spreadsheets for a living. I think I understand venture capitalism a little better than you do." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. What he conveniently forgot to mention was that he barely scraped by with a C- average, while I graduated with honors and had just been promoted to senior auditor. But before I could defend myself, my mom slammed her hand on the table. "Nora, that is enough," she scolded, looking at me like I had just insulted her religion. "Your brother is being brave. He has vision. He is taking a calculated risk to provide an amazing life for his family. You should be supporting him, not dragging him down with your negativity just because you are too scared to take risks in your own life." My dad nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Your grandfather always knew Garrett had a sharp mind for business. That is why he trusted him with the big house. To use it as leverage." I looked at the 3 of them. They were completely brainwashed by the cult of Garrett. I slowly picked up my fork, took a bite of cold pie, and swallowed it. "You're right," I said quietly, staring straight at my plate. "It is your money. Do what you want." They sold the house 2 weeks later. The market was hot, and they walked away with a massive chunk of cash. A sane person would have taken that money, invested it quietly, and rented a sensible townhouse. But Garrett and Cassandra were not sane. They were addicted to the illusion of wealth. Within a week of the check clearing, Garrett pulled into our parents' driveway in a brand new, cherry red Porsche 911. It was the most absurd, impractical vehicle for a father of 2, but he strutted around it like he had just won the lottery. They also signed a lease on a luxury downtown penthouse apartment that cost more per month than I made in 3. For the next 2 months, Cassandra's social media was a relentless nightmare of bragging. Pictures of champagne brunches. Videos of Garrett tossing his Porsche keys on marble countertops. Long, preachy captions about manifesting wealth and taking bold leaps. I just muted her profile and focused on my own life. I was pouring every spare dollar and ounce of my free time into my little 2-bedroom house. I wasn't buying luxury cars, I was buying drywall and grout. When Garrett and Cassandra decided to take a lavish, 3-week vacation to the Maldives to celebrate their new venture, they casually dropped their 2 kids, 5-year-old Maya and 3-year-old Finn, at my parents' house. After 2 days, My mom claimed her back was giving out, and she guilt-tripped me into taking the kids for the weekends. So, while my brother was sipping cocktails on a private beach halfway across the world, I was spending my Saturdays cleaning up spilled juice and trying to keep two toddlers from destroying my living room, completely unpaid and unthanked. But I didn't complain. I used the quiet evenings, after the kids were finally asleep, to systematically strip and repaint my kitchen cabinets. I laid down new backsplash tiles one by one. Every time I hit a nail with my hammer, it felt like I was securing my own independent foundation. My house wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. It was safe. And it was real. 3 months. That was exactly how long the illusion lasted. It was a Tuesday evening in late April. I was finally enjoying the fruits of my labor, standing in my newly renovated bathroom under the rainfall shower head I had installed myself. The hot water was washing away the stress of a long day at the firm. Then, my phone started buzzing on the sink counter. I ignored it. It stopped, then immediately started buzzing again. By the fourth consecutive call, a knot formed in my stomach. Nobody calls 4 times in a row with good news. I turned off the water, wrapped a towel around myself, and grabbed the phone. 6 missed calls. All from my mom. I hit callback. She answered on the first ring. "Nora," she gasped. Her voice was trembling, thick with tears. "Nora, you need to come over here right now. Please. It is an absolute disaster." "Mom, what is wrong? Is someone hurt?" I asked, my heart pounding as I rushed into my bedroom to throw on some sweatpants. "It is your brother," she sobbed. "Just get here. Please." I made the 20-minute drive to my parents' house in under 12. The moment I turned onto their street, I knew exactly what had happened. There, parked on the front lawn, was the cherry red Porsche. But surrounding it, piled on the grass and the front porch, was a mountain of luggage, cardboard boxes, and trash bags stuffed with clothes. I parked my car and ran up the walkway. The front door was wide open. The moment I stepped inside, the chaos hit me. Maya and Finn were sitting on the living room floor, both crying loudly. Cassandra was slumped on the sofa, her makeup smeared down her face, staring blankly at the wall as if her soul had left her body. And Garrett, the golden boy. He was pacing furiously in the cramped hallway, his tie ripped off, holding his phone to his ear with a white-knuckle grip. "Pick up the phone, Preston," he muttered aggressively. "Pick up the damn phone, you coward." He hit redial, over and over, his face red and sweaty. My mom rushed out of the kitchen, looking 10 years older than she had at the family dinner 3 months ago. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "They were evicted," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They lost the apartment. The money. Nora, it is all gone." I pulled my mom into the kitchen, away from the screaming kids and Garrett's manic pacing. "What do you mean it is all gone? The house money?" "All of it." My dad was sitting at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted. $500,000, my dad said, his voice completely flat. Garrett wired $500,000 to Preston's business account. Preston said the app was ready for launch. Then, 2 days ago, Preston stopped answering calls. The office downtown is empty. The corporate bank accounts are drained. Preston has disappeared. I leaned against the kitchen counter, letting the reality sink in. I wanted to scream, "I told you so." I wanted to remind them of the family dinner, of how they mocked my accounting degree. But looking at the utter devastation in my parents' eyes, the words died in my throat. "What about the rent for the penthouse?" I asked. "They were living off the leftover cash from the house sale," my mom explained, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "But between the Maldives trip, Cassandra's shopping, and that stupid sports car, they blew through it. They haven't paid rent in 2 months. The landlord locked them out this morning." I peeked out into the hallway. Garrett had finally stopped pacing. He was staring at his phone screen, a look of complete emotional bankruptcy on his face. He hadn't just lost his money, his entire ego, his identity as the superior, successful son, had been completely shattered. "So, they're staying here?" I asked, looking around my parents' modest 3-bedroom house. We have no choice, Nora, my mom said defensively. They are family. They have nowhere else to go. We will make it work. Maya and Finn can share the guest room, and Garrett and Cassandra can take the office. Has he tried to sell the Porsche? I asked practically. That car is worth at least $130,000. He could sell it, pay off some debts, and rent a normal apartment. My mom looked away, suddenly defensive. You can't ask him to do that right now, Nora. He is in a very fragile state. That car is the only thing keeping him going. If he loses that, he will completely break down. I stared at her in sheer disbelief. My brother was officially homeless, dragging his 2 kids into my aging parents' house, and they were still worried about protecting his fragile ego and his luxury sports car. I realized right then that the money was gone, but the delusion was still very much alive. I stayed for an hour, helped carry some boxes inside, and then quietly slipped out the back door. The golden boy had fallen, but somehow, I knew I was the one who was going to pay the price. Thank you for watching. If you are enjoying the story so far, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me which city you are watching from. Every comment helps the video reach more people. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the story. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as my parents' house turned into a pressure cooker. 6 people crammed into a space meant for 3. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Garrett eventually had to take a job selling cars at a local dealership. It was a massive step down from his flashy corporate lifestyle, but instead of being humbled, he just became bitter. He still wore his expensive tailored suits to the car lot, acting like he was doing the dealership a favor just by breathing their air. And Cassandra? She was completely in denial. She kept posting carefully cropped photos on her social media, holding up old designer bags in the corner of my parents' backyard, trying to make it look like they were just having a rustic weekend getaway. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Fast. My mom's modest retirement budget was never designed to feed 4 extra mouths, especially when 2 of those mouths belonged to adults who refused to compromise their lifestyle. That is when the phone calls started. My mom would call me around dinner time, her voice dripping with exhaustion. She would sigh heavily into the receiver, making sure I could hear exactly how tired she was. Then, she would casually mention how expensive groceries had gotten, how little Maya needed new shoes, or how Finn was crying because they ran out of his favorite expensive brand of snacks. I just don't know how we are going to make it to the end of the month, Nora, she said during one of these calls, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. Your dad had to dip into his emergency medical savings just to pay the water bill. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was laying the guilt trip on thick, waiting for me to volunteer. And like the dutiful, invisible daughter I was conditioned to be, I caved. How much do you need, Mom? I asked, staring at my own carefully balanced budget spreadsheet on my laptop. Oh, sweetie, I could never ask you for money, she replied, a textbook example of manipulation. But anything would help. Just to keep the kids fed. I set up an automatic transfer of $600 a month to her account. It was enough to make a dent in my savings, but not enough to ruin me. When I told her the amount, she thanked me profusely, but there was a slight pause on the line. A tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. I could hear the disappointment. She had been hoping for 1,000. Maybe more. I was helping them survive, but I noticed Garrett still had the red Porsche parked in the driveway. They were starving, but the golden boy got to keep his toy. Priorities. A month into the $600 payments, my parents invited me over for a Thursday night dinner. My mom said it was just to say thank you for all my help. I should have known better. I walked into the house, and immediately, the vibe was off. Garrett and Cassandra were nowhere to be seen, conveniently out running errands. It was just me, my mom, and my dad sitting around the kitchen table. After a few minutes of agonizing small talk, my dad pulled a thick stack of papers out of a manila folder and slid it across the table toward me. What is this? I asked, looking at the dense legal jargon on the front page. It is a personal loan application, my dad said smoothly. For Garrett. He has a great opportunity to buy into a franchise. A small coffee shop downtown. It is exactly the fresh start he needs to get his family out of our house. I looked at the numbers. It was a high-interest loan for $80,000. Okay, I said slowly. Why are you showing this to me? My mom reached out and patted my hand. Garrett's credit took a bit of a hit with the eviction, sweetie. The bank needs a cosigner. Someone with a steady income, excellent credit, and a house for collateral. We would do it, but we are retired. We don't qualify. You do. The air in the room felt suddenly very thin. They were not asking me to help buy groceries. They were asking me to tie my financial future, my credit score, and the house I had painstakingly renovated to Garrett's delusions of grandeur. No, I said. The word tasted strange in my mouth. It was the first time I had ever flat out denied them something so directly. My mom's fake smile vanished. Nora, be reasonable. It is just a formality. Garrett will make the payments. Garrett just lost $500,000 of your money, Mom. I shot back, my voice rising. He is selling used cars and keeping a $100,000 Porsche in your driveway. I am not co-signing a loan for him. If he defaults, the bank comes after my house. My dad slammed his fist on the table. He is your brother. He is flesh and blood. You have no family of your own, Nora. What are you saving all that money for if not to help your family in a crisis? The sheer audacity of his words hit me like a physical blow. You have no family of your own. To them, my life, my stability, was just an unused resource waiting to be mined for Garrett's benefit. I stood up, pushing my chair back. My answer is no. Don't ask me again. I walked out of the house, leaving my $600 of guilt money behind, and the relationship fractured beyond repair. The tension from the loan refusal lingered like a bad smell for weeks. My parents were giving me the cold shoulder, communicating only through passive-aggressive text messages. I thought the worst was over. I thought setting a boundary was the end of it. I was so incredibly naive. In early June, our extended family gathered for my cousin Bethany's birthday party at a local banquet hall. I went mostly out of obligation, planning to stay for an hour, eat a piece of cake, and leave. The music was loud and the room was packed. I grabbed a plate of appetizers and stood near the back, watching Garrett hold court by the bar, telling exaggerated stories to our uncles like he was still a millionaire tech investor. Suddenly, I felt a hand grab my elbow. It was Aunt Sylvia, my dad's older sister. She is a sharp, no-nonsense woman who has never bought into the cult of Garrett. She pulled me away from the crowd, dragging me into the quiet, dimly lit hallway near the restrooms. Nora, dear, we need to talk, she whispered, looking around to make sure nobody had followed us. How are things with your parents? Tense, I admitted, keeping my guard up. They're stressed about Garrett living there. Aunt Sylvia took a sip of her wine, her eyes locking onto mine with a fierce intensity. Listen to me very carefully. Your parents are beyond stressed. They are desperate. Your dad was complaining to my husband last night after a few too many beers. They have a plan, Nora. And you are not going to like it. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. What kind of plan? Since you refused to co-sign that loan, they realized Garrett is stuck at their house indefinitely, Aunt Sylvia said bluntly. Your mom thinks it is completely unfair that you, a single woman, have a whole two-bedroom house to yourself, while Garrett is forcing his 2 kids to share a tiny guest room. So what? I asked, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. They want Garrett to move in with me? I already told them no. Aunt Sylvia shook her head slowly. No, Nora. They don't want Garrett to move in with you. They want you to move out. I stared at her, the words not computing in my brain. What do you mean move out? It is my house. I own it. Your mom told my husband that she is going to convince you it is your family duty to give the house to Garrett, Aunt Sylvia explained, her voice filled with pity. She said you could easily rent a small studio apartment downtown. They're planning to spring it on you at the next family dinner. They're going to corner you, guilt you, and wear you down until you hand over the keys. They think because you always give in, you will give in on this too. I stood there in the hallway, completely frozen. The music from the party bumped rhythmically through the walls, but all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing in my ears. They did not just want my money. They did not just want my credit score. They wanted my home. They wanted to erase my presence completely, scoop out the life I had built, and hand it to Garrett on a silver platter. Aunt Sylvia squeezed my arm sympathetically. I thought you had a right to know. Be careful, Nora. I did not go back into the party. I walked straight out the front doors, got into my car, and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. For 28 years, I had swallowed my pride. I had played the good daughter. But sitting in that dark parking lot, something inside me finally snapped. The sadness evaporated, leaving behind a cold, crystalline anger. If they wanted a war over my house, they were going to get one. But they were going to lose before they even knew the game had started. The next morning, I woke up with a level of clarity I had never experienced in my entire life. There were no tears. There was no hesitation. The lingering hope that my parents might one day love me as much as they loved Garrett was completely dead and buried. I was free from it. I drove to work, poured myself a strong cup of coffee, and walked straight into the office of my boss, Harrison. Harrison was a strict but fair man who valued efficiency over everything else. I knocked on his door frame, and he looked up from his dual monitors. "Nora, what can I do for you?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. I sat down in the chair across from him. "Harrison, I know the company has been trying to fill the senior auditor position at the Pittsburgh branch for the last 3 months. I want it." Harrison leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. Pittsburgh was a 4-hour drive away. It was a completely different regional office. "That is a big move, Nora. You have been here for 5 years. Your roots are here. Are you sure you want to uproot your life?" "I have never been more sure of anything," I said, my voice steady and professional. "My performance numbers are the highest in the department. I trained half the junior staff here. I am ready for the responsibility, and, honestly, I need a change of scenery. I am ready to start immediately." Harrison studied my face for a long moment. He didn't ask personal questions, which I appreciated. He just saw a competent employee offering to solve a staffing problem for him. He nodded slowly. "I hate to lose you on my floor, but Pittsburgh would be lucky to have you. Give me 24 hours to make some calls to the regional director. If it clears, how soon can you relocate?" "For weeks," I said without missing a beat. "Done." I walked out of his office feeling like I had just defused a bomb. The first piece of the puzzle was locked into place. I had an exit strategy. Now, I just needed to liquidate the asset they were trying to steal. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and called Meredith. Meredith was a high-end real estate agent I had met at a networking event a year ago. She was known in our city for moving properties fast and quietly. "Meredith, it is Nora," I said when she answered. "I need to sell my house. And I need to do it aggressively. I want it listed, shown, and under contract as fast as legally possible." "Well, hello to you too," Meredith laughed. "Are we in a rush?" "You have no idea," I replied. "But here's the catch. There can be no for sale sign in the front yard. No public open houses on the weekends. Only private, scheduled showings during business hours when I am at work. Absolute discretion." Meredith paused. She was a professional. She smelled family drama from a mile away, but she didn't pry. "I can work with that. Your neighborhood is highly desirable right now, and the renovations you did will pull top dollar. I will pull the comps and send a photographer over tomorrow morning." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in deception. I lived a double life. During the day, my house was a pristine showroom for potential buyers. At night, it was a covert packing operation. I bought a dozen large plastic storage bins and started packing up my life after midnight. Winter clothes, books, sentimental items, everything got boxed up and immediately loaded into the trunk of my car, then shuttled to a rented storage unit across town before the sun came up. If my parents or Garrett dropped by unannounced, the house looked perfectly normal, just a little less cluttered. They had absolutely no idea the walls were practically empty. Meredith was a shark. Within 5 days of privately listing the property, we had a bidding war. I accepted an all-cash offer from a lovely older couple, the Mitchells, who were downsizing. The closing price was $45,000 over what I had paid for it. The closing date was set for Thursday of the 4th week. Simultaneously, I spent my evenings scrolling through real estate listings in Pittsburgh. Because the cost of living was lower, my massive profit went much further. I found a stunning, modern one-bedroom apartment in a high-rise building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river. I put down a massive down payment and secured the lease remotely. Everything was completely lined up. My new job was waiting. My new apartment was ready. My old house was sold. And my family had absolutely no clue. I was a ghost, fading out of their lives, and they were still talking to the afterimage. The invitation for the family dinner arrived via a group text from my mom on a Tuesday. Family dinner this Saturday at our house. Attendance is mandatory. We have important family matters to discuss. I stared at the text and actually smiled. Aunt Sylvia was right. The ambush was set. Saturday evening, I drove to my parents' house for what I knew would be the very last time. I parked my car, which was currently holding the last of my kitchen supplies in the trunk, and walked up the front steps. I took a deep breath, pasted a look of calm innocence on my face, and opened the door. The atmosphere in the dining room was suffocating. My dad was sitting at the head of the table with his arms crossed. My mom was nervously adjusting her napkin. Garrett and Cassandra were sitting next to each other, both wearing expressions of smug entitlement. The kids had conveniently been sent to the basement to watch a movie. We ate in painful silence for about 20 minutes. Finally, my mom put down her fork. She looked at my dad, then at Garrett, and then locked her eyes on me. Her face hardened into a mask of righteous authority. She wasn't going to ask. She was going to dictate. "Nora," she began, her voice cold and steady. "We're in a crisis, and we need to make some permanent changes. This house is too small for 6 people. Garrett and Cassandra need their own space to rebuild their lives, and the kids need a proper yard." She paused, taking a breath. "We have decided that it makes the most sense for Garrett's family to take over your house. You are a single girl. You don't need 2 bedrooms and a yard. We need you to pack your bags and move out by next weekend. We will help you find a nice, small apartment downtown." I looked around the table. My dad was nodding firmly. Cassandra was trying to hide a triumphant smirk behind her water glass. Garrett just stared at me, daring me to challenge him. They had planned this down to the letter. They expected me to cry. They expected me to argue, to bring up fairness, to beg for my home. And then they expected to wear me down until I broke. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, agonizing moment. I looked down at my plate, letting my shoulders slump forward perfectly, playing the role of the defeated, obedient daughter one last time. I looked up, forced a sad, wobbly smile, and sighed softly. "Okay." My mom blinked, completely caught off guard. "Okay," she repeated, genuinely shocked by how easy it was. "Yes," I said quietly, keeping my voice monotone. "If that is what the family needs, I will pack my bags. I can be out by next weekend." The relief at the table was immediate and disgusting. My dad let out a breath he had been holding. Cassandra beamed. Garrett leaned back in his chair, looking like a king who had just conquered a new territory. "That is my good girl," my mom said, her voice dripping with fake affection. "We knew you would understand. It is just a house, Nora. Family is what matters." I stood up, pushing my chair back. "I am going to head home early, Mom. I guess I have a lot of packing to do. Do you want some boxes?" my dad offered generously. "No," I replied smoothly. "I think I have everything handled." I walked to the front door, slipping on my shoes. As I pulled the door shut behind me, I heard Garrett's voice drift from the dining room. "We need to rip up that ugly carpet in the guest room immediately," he said to Cassandra. "And throw away that cheap sofa she has in the living room. It hurts my back just looking at it." I closed the door quietly. I walked down the driveway to my car, got in, and started laughing. I laughed until my stomach ached and tears streamed down my face. They were planning the interior design of a house I didn't even own anymore. The final week in my hometown was a blur of calculated execution. On Tuesday, the professional movers arrived at my house. Because I had already packed away 90% of my belongings into the storage unit, the movers cleared out my large furniture, the bed, the sofa, the dining table in under 3 hours. Everything was loaded onto a long-haul truck destined for Pittsburgh. When they drove away, I stood in the center of my empty living room. The house echoed. There was nothing left of me here. No pictures, no clothes, no history. I wiped down the counters, vacuumed the floors, and left the place spotless for the Mitchells. I spent Wednesday night sleeping in a cheap, $40 a night hostel near the airport. It smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but I didn't care. It felt like a luxury hotel because it was the smell of freedom. As I lay on the lumpy twin bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "We are so proud of you for making this sacrifice, sweetie. Garrett is hiring a moving truck for Thursday evening. Leave the spare key under the welcome mat. Love you." I stared at the text. I didn't reply. I just turned off the screen and went to sleep. Thursday morning, I met Meredith and the Mitchells at the title company office. We signed the final paperwork. The funds were wired directly into my new, completely separate bank account. I handed Mr. Mitchell the keys to the house, wished them well, and walked out the door. 3 hours later, I was sitting in seat 12A of a Boeing 737, watching the city shrink into a patchwork of tiny green and gray squares below me. The physical weight that had been sitting on my chest for 28 years evaporated into the thin cabin air. I landed in Pittsburgh in the early afternoon. By 4 o'clock, I was standing in my new, brilliant apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows let in a flood of golden hour light. The city skyline stretched out before me, completely unknown and completely mine. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine I bought from the corner store, sat on the floor of my empty living room, and waited for the bomb to go off. The explosion happened at exactly 6:45 in the evening. I was wiping down my new kitchen counters when my phone screen lit up. It started vibrating so hard it nearly fell off the marble island. I walked over and looked at the screen. Call from Mom. I ignored it. 10 seconds later. Call from Garrett. Ignored. Then Dad. Then Mom again. Within 15 minutes, I had 27 missed calls and a barrage of texts that escalated from confused to frantic to absolutely unhinged. "Nora, where are you? There are people in the house. Nora, pick up the phone. Garrett says the locks are changed. What did you do?" I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring the taste. Then, I sat down on my windowsill, looked out at the Pittsburgh skyline, and pressed call back on my mother's number. She answered before the first ring even finished. "Nora Elizabeth," she screamed so loudly the speaker on my phone crackled. "What the hell is going on? Garrett is standing on your front porch with a rented moving truck, and there is a family eating dinner inside. They told him they bought the house." "They did," I said, my voice perfectly calm, contrasting sharply with her hysterical screaming. "The Mitchells. They paid in cash. It closed this morning. Tell Garrett to stop bothering them, or they will call the police for trespassing." There was a dead, suffocating silence on the line. I could hear my dad yelling in the background, asking what I had said. "You sold the house," my mom finally whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock and pure rage. "How could you do something so deceitful? We told you Garrett needed that house." "You didn't tell me, Mom." "You ordered me," I corrected her coldly. "You ordered me to pack my bags and give up my home to fix the mess your golden boy made. But here is the reality check. You don't own me, and you didn't own that house. We are your family," she shrieked, the anger boiling over. "After everything we have done for you, you abandon us? You leave your brother homeless." "Garrett made himself homeless," I shot back, the 28 years of suppressed anger finally pouring out, sharp and precise. "When I won the debate state championship, you threw my trophy in a box so Garrett could display a plastic bowling award. When Grandpa died, you manipulated him into giving Garrett the mansion, leaving me the scraps. And when Garrett blew $500,000 on a scam to buy a Porsche, your solution was to steal my house and kick me out onto the street. You made it perfectly clear who your family is, Mom. And it is not me." "Nora, you listen to me right now." "No, you listen," I interrupted, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "I am in Pittsburgh. I have a new job, a new home, and a new life. Do not try to find me. And by the way, That $600 automatic transfer for groceries? I canceled it this morning. Garrett can finally sell the Porsche to feed his kids. If you hang up this phone, Nora, you're dead to me, she screamed. I've been dead to you my whole life, I said. Goodbye, Mom. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. I immediately went into the settings, blocked her number, blocked my dad, blocked Garrett, and blocked Cassandra. A few minutes later, texts started coming in from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Garrett using a burner phone or my parents borrowing a neighbor's phone. I didn't even read them. I powered down the phone completely, tossed it into the trash can, and finished my glass of wine in total, absolute silence. The next morning, I bought a new phone with a brand new, unlisted number. 6 months later. It was a crisp Sunday morning in November. I was sitting on my balcony in Pittsburgh, drinking a cup of premium coffee, wrapped in a thick blanket. My new job was incredible. Without the constant weight of my family's toxic expectations, I had thrived. I was managing my own team, making excellent money, and my apartment was fully furnished with pieces I actually loved, not hand-me-downs I had settled for. My new phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from my old hometown. I had given my new number to exactly 2 people from my past, Aunt Sylvia and my cousin Bethany. I answered. It was Bethany. Hey, Nora, she said brightly. Just wanted to check in. How is the big city? It is peaceful, Beth, I smiled, watching the boats on the river. What is the latest from the war zone? Bethany let out a dry laugh. Oh, it is a mess. You know Preston, Garrett's tech buddy? He got arrested trying to board a flight to Dubai. Federal fraud charges. The money is completely gone. I took a sip of my coffee. And Garrett? Still working at the used car lot, she said. The bank finally repossessed the Porsche last month. He had a complete meltdown in the driveway. Your parents are drowning. Your dad had to officially come out of retirement and take a full-time job at a hardware store just to pay the utility bills because Garrett and Cassandra refused to get second jobs. Aunt Sylvia said your mom cries every time she walks past your old house. I listened to the update, expecting to feel a rush of vindictive pleasure or maybe a pang of residual guilt. But I felt neither. I just felt detached. Like I was hearing a story about strangers in a town I used to visit a long time ago. Thanks for the update, Beth, I said softly. But I think I am done hearing about them. Let's talk about something else. We chatted for another 20 minutes before I hung up. I put my phone down on the small patio table and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes against the bright morning sun. For the first time in my entire life, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I wasn't second best. I wasn't the safety net. I was just me. And I was finally home. So, here's the question for you guys. Was I wrong for leaving them to face the consequences of their own actions without giving them a warning, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below to let me know your thoughts on today's story. See you in the next video.